Traditionally, many churches go straight from Palm Sunday right to Maundy Thursday. And as a story, that always troubled me a little bit. I always struggled to find the narrative flow. Ken's a storyteller, and you have to have action to move a story along. There have to be characters, and they have to do things. We go from the Hosannas, blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord, right straight to Maundy Thursday, and something has to happen in between. Going from one moment of praise and waving palm branches to Jesus' arrest just didn't make sense to me. It always felt like something was missing. Then, many years ago, I read about a liturgy for remembering Judas' role in the story and how he pushed this narrative along. And this Holy Week pause just made sense to me because each of us faces a choice each day. We can follow Jesus, or we can follow our own path. We can follow the way of love and light, or we can make our own plans and craft our own version of what God's plan might look like, assuming to ourselves that we can move forward and God will bless what we've done. Our agendas sometimes are not that unlike Judas' agenda. Judas was likely part of the zealot political movement. These revolutionaries wanted a military uprising to kick the Romans out. And they were active throughout the first century. Evidence of their presence is clear in Jesus' teachings. In particular, some scholars think that much of the Sermon on the Mount was a response to the ideology and the mentality of the zealot movement. They think about blessed are the meek, as opposed to blessed are those who have violent uprisings. Blessed are the peacemakers instead of the insurrectionists of the zealot movement. The Gospels only name one of Jesus' followers who was a part of this party. Mentioned in Luke chapter 6, verse 15, and then again in Acts 1, we have Simon the Zealot, who also makes a wonderful appearance in Jesus Christ Superstar. Gets his own song, according to Tim Rice. Since there wasn't any central, or isn't a depository of first century political records, a lot of what we know about these movements within that first century Palestine area has to be reconstructed from what we can gather from Josephus and other first century sources. Some argue that the Zealots as a unified group only came to being at the outset of the Jewish revolt in the year 66. But at that time, they were a coalition of all these groups by the time of the revolt. So when we look back at the New Testament and we try to figure out what was the motivation, what led these people to do what they did, what led Peter to leave his net and follow Jesus, what led Judas to try to move the story along, we can see that all these different factions existed under this umbrella term of zealot. And the various groups shared a few things in common. One, and first and foremost, is they all of these zealot movements wanted to kick the Romans out. And they probably had various ideas on how to do this. But if we look at Judas and what he did and how he behaved and start to see him as falling into that group, we start to see that he may have looked at Jesus despite having been with him, despite hearing him, and started picturing a militaristic Messiah. Following this line of thinking, if he believed Jesus was the Messiah, then ipso facto, Jesus must be planning a coup. He had to be. He had to be planning something to kick the Romans out. And as they're nearing Passover, and Jerusalem is this powder keg, different groups moving around, different groups raising their voices, and he sees this triumphal entry, he may have thought, it's our time. Look at them. They're cutting down palm branches. They're crying out, Hosanna. They're using these Old Testament King David type phrases Jesus, why don't you see it? Jesus, how do you not see what I'm seeing? Just maybe needed a little push. Maybe Jesus just needs a nudge to do what we think he's supposed to do. If Judas may have been thinking, if I can get him to the right place, if I can get him into the right position, then he's going to call down fire from heaven, and the Romans won't have any idea what is coming. Hello, Judas, you poor old fool. I guess you never understood. You never did know what the teacher was doing all across the land. Keep in mind a couple of factors. These Gospels were written after Easter. Therefore, they were written with the benefit of hindsight. I don't know if you do this, but many of us clean up our memories a little bit. When we recount stories, my dad is blessed with a rose-colored memory because we've recounted stories before. Do you remember that time I did this? No. You were never a bad kid. Thank you. I'm so glad you remember it that way, Dad. Sometimes we know what we're doing when we're sanitizing our memories, when we're retelling a story, leaving the less desirable parts out. But other times we subconsciously sanitize our own stories. And it's possible the gospel writers, willingly or unwillingly, wittingly or unwittingly, did some of that when recounting their former colleague and friend and member of the trusted inner circle. Judas wouldn't have been made the treasurer if they knew in real time that he was a thief. I can tell you that from a part of church leadership. If we knew someone was a thief, if they were a known pilferer of the offering plate, we would not ask them to be treasurer. By virtue of his position, there was a time in this old land when Judas was right there in the middle. There was a time when he was trusted. There was a time when the other disciples said, give him the purse. It's okay. The thoughts of his theft became much more vibrant after their post-Easter audit. For us, having a stop this Holy Week to look at him and look at the way that he played in this story gives us a chance to look at how our own faith mimics his behavior. Spy Wednesday is this time when Judas is this spy acting to betray Jesus, or the time when Judas is taking God's story into his own hands and retelling it in his own words and setting God on the shelf and saying, hang on, Lord, I've got this. We castigate Judas and hold him as the greatest betrayer of all times. Then we walk out of the sanctuary and deny Jesus by our lifestyle. We're so quick to throw stones at Judas and feel relief that at least we're not him. Meanwhile, we forget the time Jesus told the disciples about the Pharisee who prayed, God, thank you that I'm not like other people. While nearby sat the tax collector praying, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Jesus used that as a teaching moment, and in that situation he said, one of these went home justified, for all who exalt themselves will be humbled, all who humble themselves will be exalted. We judge Judas, yet Jesus said, do not judge, so that you may not be judged, for with the judgment you make, you will be judged. Why do you see the speck in your neighbor's eye when you've got a plank in your own? Our reading from Matthew 26 comes as a continuation of Jesus talking. He had been sharing with his disciples, and the Pharisees were listening in, and he came and shared what we read in Matthew 25, 31 to 46, as one of my favorite passages in Scripture about the sheep and the goats. And Matthew 26 begins while Jesus is still speaking. He tells his disciples what is coming, but they can't hear it. They are not prepared for it. They don't understand it. It's really beyond their capacity to imagine. And the same is true of us. If Jesus appeared today and told us everything God was doing, so often we would hear it and say, I don't understand. I can't follow. I can't see that big of a picture. We, like the disciples, lack the capacity to fully understand. We might even, like Judas, lack the faith to believe. We might even, like Judas, jump in, interject, and cut Jesus off. No, wait, here's what you should do. Jesus, I hear what you're saying, but this, I think, would work better. And like Judas, we have a choice. We can be stubborn. We can not listen. We can hold fast to our own perception of what should happen, or we can be open to God's judgment and movement. The disciples couldn't have conceived of Easter. And as this week unfolds and reaches its darkest moment on Friday, everyone thought that was it. Even the women who showed up at the tomb on Sunday morning, they came with spices to anoint the body. They weren't expecting Easter either. And Judas, poor old fool, I guess he didn't understand. He never did know what the teacher was doing all across the land. Judas didn't understand, and neither do we. We think we do, but so often we don't. Judas met with the chief priests and said, what sort of a deal will we make? They offered him 30 pieces of silver. And this is the deal with the devil that many of us can rationalize. We think, well, we're doing the right thing. We're doing what God would want me to do. And look, I'm getting something in return. For Judas, he would have thought that he's pushing Jesus to act. By cornering him, Jesus will certainly rise to the occasion and start acting like the Messiah Judas and many others hoped he would be. And for helping God incarnate, he'd even get paid. Jesus isn't who we want him to be sometimes. Our calling is to be who he wants us to be. Jesus doesn't change to fit our image of what he should be or do. God calls us to be transformed into Jesus' likeness. So instead of putting Jesus in the position in which he'll kick out the Romans, Judas gave Jesus just one more opportunity to show how much he loved us. Instead of becoming that mighty militaristic Messiah Judas and the others hoped he would be, Jesus pointed to a path of sacrifice and love for all of humanity. So today, what do we choose? What do we choose? Do we follow our own way or do we follow Jesus? Do we follow the path that leads to a pot of silver or the one that leads to a cross? Amen.
God, I got this. I'm good at making plans. I've been a Christian all my life, so I think I understand. I know how to build the kingdom right here in this town. God, just leave it to me, please. I know how to get around. God, some people are just so slow. It seems to take forever. But God, you see, that's not me. I'm very, very clever. I've seen the kingdom built, and I know just what to do. So God, if you don't mind at all, I'll be the best help to you. I can push things in the right direction. I can push things where they need to go. After plans and reflection, don't you see? I know. God, I got this. I'm good at making plans. God, I got this. Do you know I understand? I'll carry on from here till the great work shall be done. God, I got this, 'cause I'm a special one.